Okay, so today we're talking about built-in objects and collections. So let's go ahead and get the workbook downloaded for today's class. Remember that when you download a macro-enabled workbook, you've got to, at least on Windows, you've got to open it up in like your File Explorer, right-click it, go to Properties, and unblock it so that you can actually get to it. I don't think I've done that yet, so I'll do that same thing here as well. Open that up in my downloads, right click, properties, unblock. Oop. And then say okay. I think even before I'll open it, I'm going to give this a different name because I'll definitely want this to be for winter of 24. And this is really just to have us, have some data to work with here on this example. We're not going to be like creating charts like this. We'll have a whole day where we look at how to automate the chart creation process and so forth. But this is going to give us a few collections to work with. So kind of review back from day one, we talked about a really important idea in VBA called an object. An object has two characteristics that are really important. Those characteristics are object has properties, which is just a set of values that describe the way the object is, and it has methods, which is with behavior that the object knows how to do. And so when we talk about a collection is an object itself. So when we're saying, hey, we're talking about built-in collections, it's a particular kind of object. And what a collection is it's an object that just knows how to refer to a bunch of other objects. For example, if I look here in this workbook, there's a collection of sheets. Like this workbook has a sheets collection. That is an object, so it has methods and properties. And we use that collection object to kind of modify and work with the collection of sheets. So let's go ahead and open up the Visual Basic editor for this. And maybe I'll give myself a little more room here. Split my screen. Okay, now we don't have any modules built in here, so I'm just going to do an insert module. So I'm over here in my Visual Basic editor. I'll choose the insert from the main menu and choose module. That'll give me a place to write this code. And why don't we start off? Let's start off with this collection of worksheets. So I'll call this the sheet demo. SHEET. Okay, so debug.print will just let me put something up into the immediate window. If your immediate window isn't showing, then choose View Immediate Window to get that to show. And I'm just going to print something to the collection of sheets. So worksheets. So this now it's an object. In fact, maybe to show that it's an object, let's do this. There are several ways to refer to workbooks. I can refer to a workbook, which by the way is also a collection. We'll see that one today as well. But here's a shortcut that just says, let me refer to the workbook that contains the currently running code. And to do that, I'm going to say this workbook. So this refers to an object that is whichever workbook holds the code that is running. Like this procedure is in a workbook. Which workbook is it in? It's in this workbook. So I'm going to say this workbook dot worksheets. So this is saying I want to get to the collection of all the worksheets in this workbook. And it's going to have a property called count. Every collection has a property called count. Can you guess what this is going to print? I mean, I haven't run it yet. What's it going to print? Yeah, it'll print 2 because there are 2 worksheets in that collection. So one of the things we can always ask about a collection is how many items are there in the collection? And so I'll run this and it should just print 2. So it says, hey, this workbook, so this is the workbook called Air Traffic Passenger Statistics, whatever. And that's referring to the workbook. it has a collection of worksheets, and we can ask for the count. Now, one thing you can almost always do with a collection, not every collection, but almost every collection, there's a way to add new elements into the collection. And there could be like multiple ways to put a new element into this collection. And so I've got the worksheets collection, and instead of just printing off the count, I am going to actually add a new element into this. There's a method called add. Some folks really like to say, hey, if this is code that you're writing, I want to see an opening and a closing parenthesis, opening and closing parentheses at the end of this. And you can't do that in VBA unless you're actually using that for something. So even though this is an activity, an action, no parentheses go. Yet I can tell it's a method, not just a property, because a property by itself is not a valid instruction. Like a property is like, it's like 2. You know, if I told the computer 2, it wouldn't know what to do. Like 2 what? 3, what does that mean? So properties by themselves are not instructions to the computer. So you have to do something. In this case, I'm saying I want to print the result of this property with the immediate window. But methods themselves are instructions. So I'm telling the worksheet object, the worksheets collection, to add a new member into it. And so that should actually create a new chart. I'm sorry, it should create a new sheet. So after that line runs, I should have 3 sheets. And so this should now print 3 when it executes. And you can see that I've got a new sheet added here. So this, the add method then allows me to make a new element into this collection. Adding worksheets is something that is pretty common to do. And almost always when you add a new worksheet, you want to do something with that worksheet. So it turns out the nice thing is that when you add a new worksheet, it becomes the active sheet. And so I can refer to that one by referring to the active sheet. Let me just go ahead and do that right here. I'm going to print active sheet.name. So just like this workbook refers to the workbook that holds the currently running code, there's like another shortcut that gets me to the active worksheet, and it's called active sheet. And so that should allow me to get to the name property of the sheet that was just added. So right now I can see the most recently added one was sheet 1. When I run this again, it should add a new one, make it active. I'm expecting it to be sheet 2. And so that should print sheet 2, and then it should print 4 here because it will have added another sheet. Print sheet 2 and 4. But what if I want to add 4 or 5 sheets at the same time, and then after I've added them, do stuff to them? I'll only know which is the most recently added one because that's the one that will be active. It turns out that this add method is going to return a reference to the element that it just added to the collection. Ooh, what does that mean? It's going to make a new worksheet. Everything that's being displayed on the screen here has to be stored in memory somewhere. And so when I say it's returning a reference to the thing that was just created somewhere in memory, this sheet is stored in memory. And it's at some particular location, some address, some memory address where it is. So literally what this add is going to do is it's going to send back a reference to the sheet that it just created. Now, here's what I'd like to do. I would like to be able to, right now, I'm not doing anything with it. It's like sending it back and there's nothing to catch it. And so it just like goes great. It just evaporates into thin air. Thank goodness. I don't want it rolling around on the inside of my computer. So it's just done. But I could catch it if I want to. Here's how I'll catch it. Let me dim WS as an object variable. Can anyone just tell me anything about an object variable? This is one of the data types that we learned about on our second day when we talked about different types of variables and constants. Object is a particular kind of one. Do you remember anything about it? A little louder? Oh, so you have to use the keyword set when you're using it. Yeah, we're going to use that here in just a second. Good. What else? Anyone remember anything else about it? Kind of the interesting thing about the object variable is that it's not an object itself. Like when you create a string variable, you're saying, yeah, I'm going to hold a string there. You create an integer variable, I'm going to hold an integer in that variable. An object variable, you don't hold the object in the variable. All you do is you hold a reference to the object. An object variable is just long enough to hold the memory address about where an object is actually stored in memory. So it's really just a tiny little bit of memory, just enough to keep track of where the object actually is. And so what I'm going to do is, I've got this variable now called WS that I want to refer to the location where that new worksheet gets created. Fortunately, the add method, and this is common when you add something into a collection, for it to return a reference to what just got added to the collection. And so I'm going to catch it here by saying set WS equal to the result of this add statement. It's going to create the sheet. It'll create it somewhere in memory. And it will say, here's the location in memory. I'll hand it back, and I'm going to catch that in the worksheet object variable. So now I could print active sheet name because it will be the active sheet. But let me print ws.name because this is a reference to the object that's created by the add method of the worksheets. And so even if I was to activate some other thing before that newly created sheet, so it won't be the active sheet anymore, I should still be able to get to that name. Let me just activate another sheet. So in this workbook, there's a couple of ways I can refer to elements in the collection. Right, this workbook.worksheets. One way is to refer to it by its ordinal position. Like whatever is in the number 1 position, that's the sheet that I'm talking about. So this is a reference to a particular worksheet, just a reference to an object. And now I want to tell it to become active. I want to execute its activate method. A-C-T-I-V-A-T-E. I am telling and I'm giving an instruction to a particular worksheet. Which one? Whichever one is the first worksheet in the collection of worksheets in this workbook. I'm telling it to become active. The first one here is air traffic passenger statistic. And so when I run this, it should give me a new sheet. I'm expecting it to be called sheet 3. This will then activate a different sheet. But because I captured a reference to the sheet that I created, I can use that reference to refer to it later, even though it's no longer the active sheet. So this should still print sheet 3 as the name. And then the worksheet count should be 5 at this point. Clear off my immediate window, and I'll run this again. So here it's created sheet 3, but then I activated my first worksheet. Whoa, that's a great cough. But I'm still able to refer to that sheet that was newly created. Show me how comfortable you are on what we've done so far today. 0 to 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Excellent. All right. Let's see another way to refer to a sheet. So with a collection, you can almost always, in fact, I cannot think of an exception where there's a collection that you could not refer to it by its ordinal position. That's just like base functionality of any object, any collection object. You can refer to an element with a number. Sometimes the elements in a collection have a name property, like a worksheet or a workbook or a chart. These things all have names. And when they have names, you can refer to them by their name as well. So let me do this. So I've got another sheet in here called charts. Here's a sheet called charts. So one that's got some data, one that's got some charts. I'm going to go ahead and activate the first one. It may happen too fast for you even to see it, but we'll see if it kind of flickers on there. We're going to add a new sheet. It will become active. Then I'm going to activate sheet 1, and then I'm going to immediately, well, let me print the name of that one so we got something happening there. That should print that it was actually the air traffic passenger statistics sheet. And then I'm going to activate, not by its number, but identifying it by its name. I'll use a string literal, so put it in quotes, and charts. It's not case sensitive, so I could put a lowercase c and that would be okay. So it should give me a new chart, it should give me a new sheet, and remember the sheet that got created, then activate the first one, print the name, air traffic passenger statistic, then activate a different one, print the name of the sheet that just got created, and then show the count. But charts should end up being the most recently active sheet. So when this runs, that should be the sheet that's activated. Oh, somehow we didn't get, oh, sheet 4 is the first one now. So when it added before, it became the first one. So that's exactly what it should have done. So I wasn't expecting sheet 4 here. And that's because I didn't tell it where to add. So let's do this. So it turns out my add method does allow me to give an argument to it. Let me go ahead and do that. I can give it a before, I can give it an after, I can give it a count, like how many sheets to add. I don't think I've ever specified to add with one statement to add multiple sheets, but I guess you can. But I'm going to say I want to just add this after the traffic passenger statistics. So when I'm providing arguments to a method, I can just put them in order, or if I want to skip one of these, the fact that this is shown in a square bracket means it's optional. I don't have to provide any of these values. But if I want to just skip one over, I can also address them by name. So I'll say after, and then I put colon equals, and then I give it a reference to some sheet. So what sheet do I want it to go after? I want it to go after, let us say I want it to go after the first sheet. Now, how do I refer to the first sheet? Yeah, right here, this workbook, worksheets 1, that's the very first sheet. So after is going to be the first sheet. That says, put that in after the first sheet. I need a little more space here. So now I'm going to go ahead and just move sheet 4 out of the way here so that air traffic passenger is my first one. So now, regardless of which sheet is active, when I add the new worksheet, it should go right here after the air passenger traffic statistic. It should then activate the first one, print it, activate the chart sheet, print the name of the newly created one. Printed the first one, that new sheet should have gone right after that one. There it is, sheet 5. And it printed the name of sheet 5, but it activated the chart sheet. So we've seen a couple things, that you can add elements into a collection. You can refer to a specific element in the collection by using its ordinal name, its ordinal position, or you can refer to it by its name if it has a name. Not all collections of objects have names. But when they do, you can almost always refer to them by their name. Okay, questions? Let's do one more thing on this example, and that is, instead of using the generic object here, what's another word that I could put here that would make sense in the context of what I'm doing here? Instead of just making this any old kind of object, I could say, yeah, worksheet. And that says, this is an object, but now I'm only allowed to bind on to worksheet objects. But the main reason that I like to do that is because now if I say WS dot, it goes, oh, this is a worksheet. Here's the list of things that worksheets can do. So it kind of helps me write my code. All right. Well, let's do one more thing here. We haven't had our day of working with loops yet, although the last time we were together, we did a little loop. Let's go ahead and make another loop here. Let's see. We've seen so far only the do loops. Let's do this with the do loop. We're gonna add all of these, and then I just want to iterate over the elements of this collection. I want to say, well, however many there are, I want to run code that does the same thing to every single element in this collection. So I'll do this. Let me go ahead and set up my loop. Do and loop. Oh, by the way, here's a little tip. This is like an expert tip. Anytime you make a do loop, and some of you experienced this last time we were together, if you don't give a way out of that loop, like that loop is going to take control of the thread that's running Excel. And it will be just going back and forth so fast that nothing you do can interrupt it. Like you want to like activate a different sheet. Sorry, it's too busy running this loop, even though that loop is doing nothing. And so if you want to say, hey, you know what? I would like you one time, every time, like once for every time you go through this loop, just stop for a moment and see if I'm trying to get your attention. And I can put this statement in here, do events, one word. It's okay to put do events inside of any kind of loop you make, and we'll learn the next kind of loops here before very long. But it's always helpful in a do loop because it's pretty easy to put yourself in an endless loop with a do loop. So do events, in fact, I'll just go ahead and run this now. Now if it says do events, it will let me break into it, but let me go ahead and run this. And it seems like I should still be running. Yeah, so it's still running here. It did what it did, and it's still running. It is processing this loop as fast as it can. But because I've got do events in there, if I hit the pause button up here, it'll be like, okay, I can pause. Without that do events, it just would never even notice that I'm trying to tell it to pause. So that's a healthy thing to do. Okay, so I'm going to do, and let me go ahead and declare a variable, declare it up here at the very top. Let me dim x as an integer. And I'm going to start off by making x equal to 1. And then inside this loop, I'm just going to debug.print this workbook. Dot worksheets number x dot name. I'm going to print. That is going to say, oh, I want to refer to the first element in the worksheets collection. And I'm going to print the name of that element. I'm then going to change the value of x to go up. And I will do this until, give me a way out of this loop, until, until x is greater than, how do I know when to stop? X is going to start at 1. Each time in the loop, x is going to go up by 1. Let's say x is going to take on a new value. What's the new value going to be? It's going to be its current value plus 1. It's going to go 1 more than the current value. How do I know when I should stop? Yeah, I've only got a certain number of worksheets to actually look at. So I'm going to look at this worksheets collection, do until x is greater than the count property of that worksheets collection. And I see that every time I make a syntax error here, it's nagging me. I'm going to turn that off, but because you may want to turn that off too, I'm going to do it slowly so you can see. It's like if I type something that's syntactically invalid, like x equals and then nothing, it's like, hey, that's a mistake. Yeah, okay. And by the way, if you click help, like the one thing that's guaranteed to happen is that you will get no help. And that seems what that is about. So I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to come up to Tools, my main menu, Options, and auto syntax. In fact, I'm just going to change these two. Auto syntax check, I'm going to turn off. It'll still, if I have a line with an error, it'll still turn red. It just won't put up the dialog box when that happens. So that's nice. And require variable declaration, I'm going to turn that on. What that says is, listen, like if you're going to use a variable, you have to declare it first. I think that's healthy. And I'll say, okay. Now I'll say x equals 1, but if I change that back and leave the line, it still goes red, but it doesn't nag me, thank goodness. X equals 1. Okay, so now I think before I get here, I'm going to print kind of a divider so that I can see kind of the difference in my immediate window. Debug.print. And I'm just going to print a bunch of equal signs just so I can see. Just before I come into this loop, I should have those equal signs printed across. So now it'll go and do whatever it does, but then it should go through and print the names. In fact, let me also print x in front of this. So I'm going to debug.print x comma, so we'll print the value of x, and then it should print the name of the sheet at the xth position in my collection. And I'll run it. So it kind of did the normal thing here. Then we got to this loop. And it's print the name of the first one, name of the second one, third one, finally to the 9th one. So that's one of the things that's really powerful about a collection is that I can say, listen, I've got some code that I want to execute on every element of this collection or on half the elements of this collection. Maybe I only want to print the ones that start with sheet. I got to show you something that I really haven't talked to you about yet, but no, forget it. We'll get to conditional branching when we get to it. So at this point, just believe me that you can say, you know what, I want to look at the characteristic of this sheet and decide if it's something I want to process. I don't have to do it to all of them, but we just haven't seen how to do conditional branching yet. That's coming up. But nice, one little block of code, and I can do it uniformly across all the elements of the set. All right, is there anything else I want to show you about the worksheets collection? I can't think of any. So let's look at a different collection. By the way, I mean, probably the biggest collection that we have here is like the collection of cells, working with ranges. That's another example of a built-in collection, but we're going to have a whole day just on working with ranges. So let's look at a different collection. And so instead of our sheet demo, I will make one called our workbook demo or our book demo. So I think most often you've got a single workbook that your macro is going to be working on. But sometimes you're saying, listen, I've got a bunch of data in, like a whole set of workbooks, and I need to be able to work with multiple workbooks simultaneously. Well, there's a collection for that. So let's just do this. Let me start with just printing the count of those. Debug.print. And I want to kind of emphasize that this is a property of some object. So my top level object in Excel is the Excel application itself. And the way I refer to it is like this, application, application dot. So the application refers to Excel. The top level object in Excel is Excel itself. And it has methods and properties and so forth. Wow, wait a minute. Active cell? Wait, the active cell is a property of the application? Does that make sense? Why is it that you're nodding your head? Why?
To have an active cell in Excel, it has to be inside the application itself.
It has to be inside the application Excel, but it seems to me the active cell should be part of the workbook. Like every workbook has its own active cell. And maybe even on the worksheet, every worksheet has its active cell. But the active cell here from the application is saying there's only one workbook active at a time. And in that workbook, there's only one worksheet active at a time. And on that worksheet, there's only one cell that's active. You can have multiple cells selected, but only one of them is the active cell. Only one of them is the one that if you start typing, it's going to receive the keystrokes. And so that's like a shortcut to be able to get to the one active cell that can actually be truly active at a time. That's kind of nice. But I'm going to refer to the workbooks collection. And it has a count property. So when I run this one, it should just tell me how many workbooks I have. Now, how many workbooks are open? What do you think that's going to print for me? How many workbooks do I have open in Excel right now? I think it's just one. I'm doing Alt-Tab over here. I'm just seeing the one. Yeah. At least there's only one visible. Now, you may remember when we first talked about recording macros, we're like, hey, you could record this into your personal macro workbook. And if you did that, you created a new workbook that gets opened every time you open Excel and it gets hidden. So even though you don't see it, that's an open workbook. And the workbooks collection is a collection of not all the workbooks on my computer, but all the workbooks that are currently open in this instance of Excel. I don't think I have a personal macro workbook running, and so I expect to see just one when I run this. Let's see what it does. Just one. Anyone get two when you ran it? No? Yeah. Do you have another workbook open, or just your personal macro workbook? You got a couple other workbooks open, but you didn't get, then you got 3 or 4, however many workbooks you had open. Yeah. All right, well, let's kind of do some of the same thing here. How do we add a new workbook? If you're going to guess, how would you think you would add a new workbook? Someone just give it a shot. I'll get you started. Application.workbooks.add. Yeah, it's the same thing. And that's really common. Like if you're just going to kind of create a new element for this class, there's going to be some .add method. And so now that should add a new workbook. And now I've got 2, and here's the other workbook now having been added. I'm going to run that a few times. I'm going to get a few workbooks open here. They're all opening on my other screen, but they're here, believe me. There's a bunch of them now. All right, so let me close all of them, except the very first one. Let's do this. I'm going to declare another loop here, dim x as an integer. Wait a minute, is that going to be a problem because I've declared x down here? And the answer is no. When I declare a variable inside of a subprocedure, it's only alive while that subprocedure is running. And so the fact that I've got the name used somewhere else, not a problem, because this is x inside my book demo method. This is x inside my sheet demo method. They don't conflict with each other at all. And let me do this. Let me do another do loop. Do loop. You come in here and say do events. And now I'm going to start x instead of at 1. I'm going to start x. Instead of counting up for this one, I'm going to count down for this one. So x equals application.workbooks.count. I'm going to start it off referring to my very top one. And I'm going to do until x is less than 2. I could say until x equals 1. I think it would probably work just fine. But I'm going to say x is less than 2, just in case something weird happens and I end up going from 2 to 0. I still want to stop. And by something weird happens, I mean, I will have written something I didn't mean to write. It's not like something weird happens, unexpected, and this time the code runs one way and otherwise it runs another way. It'll run the same each time, but in case I make a mistake. So now let me just debug .print x, comma, application.workbooks by its number, name. So this would be something similar, but we're going to make a substantial change here in just a minute. And then now x equals a new value. What's it going to be? Its old value minus 1. So we're starting at the number of elements we have. And then we're going to print off all of their names. And they're exciting names like book 7, book 6, book 5. Got my do events in there, so I should be happy to run it, but it's always a good idea to save before you run a new loop, just in case. And I'll run. So it created a new sheet, and then my 12th book is called book 11. Why is it off by 1? My 11th book is called book 10. My 10th is called book 9. They're all up. Why are they off by 1? It's not a zero-based index. So we will deal with some zero-based indexing schemes in VBA, but collections are 1-based. So the first element in the collection is number 1. Yeah, my first book is this one, air traffic passengers. Well, why didn't it print that one? Yeah, I said stop. I mean, when x is less than 2, that's how I should get out of this loop. When x is equal to 2, is this expression true or false? When the value of x is 2, is this condition true or false? It's false, so I'm going to come in here and execute this. It's going to make it down to 1. When the value in x is 1, is this true or false? It's true, so it lets me out immediately before it ever prints this with x being 1. I'm just not seeing it. Well, what I'd like to do instead of just printing it is I want to close it. So application.workbooks sub x dot close. Interestingly here, we have this option here for save changes. It's the first argument, so I'm just going to put here false. Normally, if I try to close a workbook and it hasn't been saved, it's going to prompt me, hey, do you want to save this workbook? No, I just created it. They don't have anything in them. I know that. I don't want to save any of them. So close it. And by the way, don't save and don't ask. Did I tell you about the student? I don't think I told this story to you. was teaching a class for, I think it was Blue Cross of California. Before I went to get my doctorate, I did corporate training. I flew around the world, and one of the things I taught was VBA. I flew around the country anyway. And I was teaching this class. There was about 15 students in the class. It was a day-long class. It might have been a 2-day class, if I remember right. And we were just kind of getting to the record macros, and you could record a macro and assign a hotkey to it. And we kind of talked about that. And did you ever have a class, where there's like some student in the class that just likes to make annoying comments regularly? Just raise your hand if you've been in a class like that. Yeah, every single class I was ever in had a student like that, because it was me. I was the guy who was doing that. And we were in this class, and we had this guy who was kind of making weird comments. And he sat at the very back of the room, and we already recorded a macro, and we got to something like this. It was like how to close a workbook and automatically save it without prompting you to do it. And he said, what statement would you use to close the active workbook, not save the changes and not prompt the user, just to close without saving? And there's probably nothing good you could do with that code, but it was like literally changing from true to false, the false that I have up here. So I told him, and I moved on for about another 2 minutes. And he goes, kind of laughed. And we kind of looked at him, what? He said, I just made a macro that closed the active workbook without saving the changes, without prompting the user. And I assigned the shortcut key. What shortcut key did he assign to it? Control S. He assigned Control S to it. And we kind of had a similar, it wasn't really it was a little chuckle so we could move on. Please let us move on. Then a couple of hours later, I was like, hey, let's take a break for lunch. Everyone save your workbook. And he goes, what? And he didn't realize that he forgot that he had done that, and he closed his workbook. And the rest of us had a good laugh. We went and had a great lunch. It was good. All right. So let me just go ahead and bring these over here. So that's what we're doing. We're telling it to close the active workbook without saving the changes and without prompting the user. And it should close all of them except that very first one, which is the air traffic control. Now, why is that air traffic control, by the way? When you look at the sheets in the air traffic control, why is this sheet number 1 in the collection? Is it because it was the first one created? No. No, not the workbook, the worksheet. Why is this sheet the first in the collection of sheets in this workbook? It's not alphabetical. It's because it's in the first position, the leftmost position. And so the order of worksheets is easy to change just by dragging the tab around. That'll change the order in the collection. The order of elements in the workbooks collection is the order in which they were open. And so far as I know, the only way to change the order in the collection would be like to close it, open it again, it would go to the end. I don't know of a way to like switch those around. There may be, but I don't know what it is. And so that's why the reason that this one is the one that's not going to get closed is because it's the first one that's open, and I'm counting down backwards through them. Okay, so I'm going to hide that one because I want to kind of see the rest of these go one at a time. All right, so I'm going to come and run my book demo again, and it should create a new workbook, print the count, and then count back through those and close all those workbooks. I'm going to save just in case I've done something wrong and it's going to close this one. I'm going to save, and then I'll play. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And the one's still there. I minimized it so you could see the rest of them going. So that one got saved. Okay, so one way to add an item into this collection is to just create a new one. But can you think of a different way? What would be a different way? Instead of creating a new workbook into the collection of workbooks for Excel, what's another way to put a workbook into the collection? Yeah, just open an existing one. So let's see how we would do that one. So a different way to add an element to this collection, it's got a method called open, which instead of making a brand new workbook, it takes an existing one, reads it from disk, puts it into memory, and it then becomes a member of the collection. So let me just go ahead and save. Let me, I'm just going to stop the code right here, put a little stop statement in here. We're going to get familiar with lots of debugging tools. We got a whole day on debugging and error handling. But for right now, stop will just, when it executes stop, it'll take me, it'll stop the code right there and say pause right here. That'll just create a new workbook. And now I just want to save this. FS, I'm going to call it, I'll put it in my downloads. I think in my downloads. And that's book 13 would sound unlucky. I will call this profit and loss. I'll call it salary reduction proposal. That was like, not that I would ever encourage you to do anything with malware, but if you want to introduce malware into some company, all you have to do is like format a flash drive that, like a thumb drive that has the malware on it, drop it in the parking lot, and right on the outside of it, salary reduction proposal. And someone is guaranteed to plug that in and see what's on it. So don't open this workbook. It's a bad workbook. Okay. And so now I'll close this and I'll stop. My code should still be, oh, interesting. It looks like it stopped my code from running. Like doing that process actually stopped the code as well. Okay, so now what I want to do, I'll just go ahead and leave the stop there. We're going to create a new workbook. We're going to close it without saving it. But now I also want to open that particular one. So let's say application.workbooks.open. And now I'm going to give it like the name of that workbook that I want it to open. Now, what I'm not entirely sure about is, will it find it here in my downloads because that's where this workbook currently is? Let's run it and find out if it does it. So I'm going to just put in, that's the one that I want to open. And we'll hit stop. I'm not sure that's going to work. You may have to make that a little more complex. Let's go ahead and run it and find out. Nice, yeah, so it did. So it found it. So I just gave it a name. I didn't tell it where to look. And so where to look looks like it looked in the same location where this workbook is stored. So it created my new one, workbooks.add. It opened this one. If I were to come to my immediate window now, and because I'm in break mode, because I've got this yellow arrow right here, I can kind of like ask what's in memory at this point. So I could say, what is application? Oops. And just say, hey, come in here and execute this line. It'll print how many workbooks are there. Application.workbooks.count, there's 3. When I continue this to run on, it should close everything but that first one again. But the point is that we can open it by its, we can add an element to this collection by opening it instead. So I'll go ahead and hit play to finish running that out. Oh, I'm kind of surprised it didn't close this one. Why didn't it close this one? Hit stop. It's less than 2. Let me close that and just run it again. Sorry, we could not find it. Has it been deleted? Oh, somehow I got rid of what I didn't want to get rid of. Yeah, it's trying to open a workbook with no name. I'm gonna have to go get it again. Undo. Redo. Okay. Application.workbooks.open. In fact, actually, I wanted to be a little bit more sophisticated about this anyway. What I'd like to do is I would like to say, I want to like tell it to look in the same location as this folder, or I could tell it to look somewhere else. I could specify the full path to where that file is located. So let's look at a property of like the current workbook. So active workbook. So this workbook is the workbook that's running the code. Active workbook is whichever workbook happens to be active. And so every workbook has a path property. This one hasn't been saved yet, and so there's no value in the path property. So let me come back and activate the one that has been saved to the disk. And I'm just going to print that, and it will tell me that's the path. So whether I'm on Mac or Windows, it'll show me the appropriate path here. So what I can do here is say application.workbooks.open, and then I will specify in here like the full path. So I can say I want it to find it in the same location as this workbook, wherever this workbook is. And then I'm going to concatenate onto that the backslash character, because this path doesn't end with a backslash. I need another backslash on there to be able to put the name of my file. And then I'll put the name of that workbook as well, which is Salary Reduction Proposal. So that will then open that one. I'm still curious to find out why it closed. Anyone here see what I've done with my code that's making it close? Like, I'm not asking that because, like, as a quiz, couldn't find it. Backslash. Oh, that's because it shouldn't be active workbook, because this one has become active. What should this be instead of active workbook? Should be this workbook. Okay, so now I've got 3 workbooks open. Oh, that's the reason. So here, at this point, when I executed this line, how many workbooks, what was the count here? Okay, so I think when I started, I had only the one open. It added 1 to make it 2. Said to print the count. Print 3, how many do I have open? Oh yeah, it was 3. That's why, and I do have 4 open at this point. So here's book 15, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so that's why it printed that 3. So I set X equal to 3, and then I opened another one. And what did that change? That changed the count. So when I get down here, because I've already set X to 3, I'm going to start at 3. That's why I'm missing that first one. So I just need to move this line down. And then it should be closing that one that I opened by name as well. So I'm going to stop this and run the code again. Should open another one. Give us a 4. Five, because it's happening now after. Now, if I run it through, it should close all those out except for the 1. Yeah. So I was just setting X's value before I was adding the last workbook, which is why it skipped closing that one. Okay, one last thing on the workbooks, and that is that just in the same way that we could capture a reference to which worksheet had just been created, we can capture a reference to the workbook that was just opened. So I'm going to come up here and dim WB as a workbook. And when I open my salary, here's where I'm opening my salary reduction. I'm going to say set WB equal to this. Now, because I'm doing something with the return value, this is going to return a reference to the workbook that was just opened. But because I'm trying to capture that and I'm sending in an argument, that's when I've got to put this in parentheses. And this is like one of the confusing things about VBA. When do you put parentheses around the argument list and when do you not? And if I could go back to the early 90s and convince the designers of this language to make a different choice, I would. The only time you put parentheses around an argument list in VBA is if you're doing something with the value that comes back. Before I was capturing this, then these, not only were these parentheses not allowed, not necessary, they're not allowed. So as soon as I'm saying, hey, this is sending back a reference, I'm going to capture that. I've got to wrap this in parentheses. And the reason is, I don't know if you really want to know the reason for this, but the reason is that if it's sending a value back, I could actually embed it inside another function call. Like have some function call and whatever value comes back, it could be the argument that's going to some other function. And as soon as that's the problem, you'd lose the order in which the arguments are going if you didn't bind them with parentheses. So yeah, we're going to fight this all semester because it's like it's a strange thing about the language. So parentheses go around the argument list that you're sending to a method or a statement or a function if you're doing, not if it's returning a value, but if you're doing something with the value that comes back. Okay. So now I will capture that this way. And let me just go ahead and I'm going to stop here and we'll see what we can do with that. So at this point, WB is referring to that particular workbook, that salary reduction workbook. So I should be able to say print wb.name or wb.path. And it should be able to kind of look at the other properties of that particular object. So we've seen how to create new workbooks. We've seen how to open existing workbooks. We've seen how to close workbooks, either saving or not saving the changes. Let's go ahead and do this. We've opened WB. I'm now going to add a new sheet, wb.worksheets.add. And then I'll close this workbook, wb.close. And save the changes. So now let me go ahead and bring my active statement back up to the last one that hadn't run. So now I'm going to go through this one step at a time just by coming to my debug window and choosing step into this first one. F8 would do it as well. We'll see it add that worksheet. So here's my salary reduction proposal. Added sheet 2. I'll run that line with F8 again, and it will close that workbook and save it. Now I'll go ahead and run this code the rest of the way, and it should close that other newly created workbook without saving it. Press play. I thought, oh, it hits another stop there. Press play, and it finishes off. If I were to run this again, we'll see that that sheet actually did get saved. Where's my salary reduction proposal? Oh, I think I closed it because I didn't have the stop in the right place. Let me move my stop up. And now it should have added another sheet. So when we see it this time, it should have 3 sheets in it. So here's my salary reduction proposal, and there's the 3 sheets that we have. The point is that I'm saving this one independently by closing it with the true argument. Questions? Yeah. Do you have to open it to do something to it? And the answer is yes. So if I want to manipulate a workbook, if I want to change something in a workbook, step 1, I have to open the workbook. Yeah, when we get later in the class, you'll find out that there would be like another way that you could do it without actually opening it in Excel. You're gonna have to open the file, but like the underlying structure of the file, you could open it outside of Excel and go change it. It's a nightmare. But there is a way to like change it without actually opening it in Excel. But you still have to open it. You have to read it into memory. There's a question over here. Oh. The question is, what if I wanted to open a workbook, but never let the user see that it was open? How many of you are like, this would be cool to know how to do? Just a couple of you? There's a few of you here. All right, let's do it. It is, the answer is no. There's no way to do it unless you know a trick. Here's the trick. While there's no way to say open this workbook without showing it, like open it and make it hidden by default, what I could do is I could open another instance of Excel and have that whole instance of Excel hidden and open it in that instance of Excel. The add drop deadline has not passed. Oh, no, it has passed, so you can't drop. So good, because this is going to be complex. And so, if you're saying, boy, I don't want to do that, that's okay. Like you could check your email the next little bit. Let's see how to do it. Okay, so you want to change a workbook invisibly, right? Let's make another sub procedure for that. Change WB invisible. Turning off screen updating won't do it. Yeah, I've been down that road. Okay. So what we have to do is we have to open another instance of Excel. I don't remember how to do that. Fortunately, the great Google does. Excel, VBA, open another instance of Excel. Do I believe in generative AI? No, it should have shown me already what I was looking for. Open specific Excel file in a new instance of Excel. This should show us what we do. That's what I needed right there. Okay, so let's get back to our code. So we're going to have to dim that, dim obj Excel as object. I don't know what type I should declare it as to actually have it be the right kind for here, but that should be okay. By default, this is going to open invisible, I think. Let's go ahead and just stop right here. So I'm going to run this code. And so, yeah, there's no indication that I have another instance of Excel open. But I should be able to change that. I should be able to come and say obj.excel or obj Excel. So this is a reference to that new instance of Excel. It should have a visible property. I'm just going to set it to true, and I'll drag my arrow back and run it from there. It'll stop at the stop again. obj Excel, create object. Well, I don't know how to make it visible, but the whole point is we want it to be invisible anyway. So let's see if we can open an object with it. obj Excel. Okay, so that will be identical to application, right? We say application.workbooks.open a workbook. This is now a new top level version of Excel. So .workbooks.open. And I'm going to put the full path to that file I'm trying to open. That should open that. And then, well, let me run that, see if that works. Okay, so now it seems like it's opened it in that hidden version of Excel. Let me go ahead and change something on it. So obj Excel workbooks. Let's just go ahead and see what our count of workbooks is at the moment. Only got one. So when that opened first, it didn't open a blank workbook. Just open the one we just opened. So now I should be able to say workbooks number 1 dot worksheets number 1 dot cells number 1. So that should be the first cell on the first worksheet of the first workbook that was open in this version. I'm just going to set its value property. Hi there, it's, and then I'll concatenate on the current time from the system clock. Now, that should be a string that just says, hi there, it's, and then it'll tell me the date and time. And when I execute that, it should write that to that workbook. Now, I think I'm ready to save that workbook. So here's a reference to that worksheet, that workbook. Save. There's also a save method. That should save it. I'm going to try one more time to make it visible. Yeah, it's got a visible property. Maybe I just typed it. Oh, thank you. So Excel object dot visible. That should BIS BLE. That should return, yeah, true or false. So if I change it to true, I should be able to see it. Yeah, there it is. So here's that workbook. We can see the change that I made in it. I should be able to close it. And if I were to open it again, that change would be there. Here's proof. I thought, stop this. That was the file I thought I changed. Order of proposal. I'll run it again. Apparently I saved it somewhere. I didn't mean to save it. Yeah, so let's do this. Cancel this. Stop that. Don't save. And I think it's a save that was the problem, because I think when it saved it as in some different location. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what I was trying to save. Anyway, by leaving that invisible, we can get there and manipulate it. I'd have to track down exactly what I'm kind of struggling with to actually get it to save right. But so that's how you would do it. Okay, one more set of objects that I want to look at, one more set of collections I want to look at in class today. And that is those charts that we had on the chart sheet. In fact, I'll delete all the rest of these besides chart. So I'd like just to be able to iterate over these charts. We're going to have a whole day where we're talking about charts, but kind of the weird thing to realize is that a chart can either exist as its own sheet, like one sheet that's a chart itself, or you can put a chart onto a worksheet, but you don't really put it directly onto the sheet. Chart has to go into a shape, and a shape can be on a sheet. So the set of, if I want to think about these charts, look at all these charts, I will have to use the shapes collection. So we'll come up here and make another sub procedure. Let me dim SHP as a shape object. And let me set SHP equal to, on my active workbook or on this workbook, like let's do this. To kind of simplify my code, I'd like to get a reference to that particular sheet. So let me dim S as a worksheet. Let me set S equal to this workbook. Dot worksheets. And we're looking at the one named charts. So now this is going to refer to a particular object in the collection, the chart sheet, and it's going to say, hey, this object variable S is going to hold a reference to that sheet. So now I can set my shape equal to S, which is that sheet, dot shapes. And then I want the first one in the collection. Okay, so I've run to that position. I've stopped here. because I'm in break mode, I should be able to see both S and SHP. There's the name of that worksheet. And here's the name of that shape called chart 4. My first chart is called chart 4. Yeah, I think when I was making this sheet, I made 3 charts to start with. I threw them away. I made another one, and that one stuck. The rest of them went up from there. So now I can manipulate properties of this shape. So SHP dot top equals 10. I don't know what it currently is, but 10 has got to be higher than it currently is. Yeah, right now, that one is at 632. Now, which one of these do you think is chart number 4? I mean, which one do you think is the first chart in the collection? It might be this one, but I think the charts in this collection, the shapes in this collection, I'm not sure if they remember the order in which they were created, or if it just kind of reads through and finds them. But I don't know a way to know which one that would be, to look at this and know which one it would be. I don't think it's the upper left-hand corner one. So, but when I change this, we should see it move. So let me zoom out a bit. And when I execute this line, we should see it jump. Oh, it was Asia. That was the first chart in the collection. I should be able to change the left of it. In fact, I'll make it like what it used to be, plus 10. That should move it over a bit. Anyway. So I can iterate across this set of shapes just the same way that we iterate across sheets. Should we see it? Should we move all of these? Should we move all these charts over? Like just shift them all over? Let's do it. So we'll set up another do loop. Do loop, do events. And then inside this loop, we are just going to say, oh, we better declare X as a variable. We will do until X is greater than S dot shapes, the shapes on this sheet, dot count. We better increment X inside of our loop, X equals X plus 1, and then we'll do something with it. We'll just say that the left of that is equal to what it used to be concatenated with 100. That should shift all of the charts over by 100 units, whatever 100 units is. It's not a pixel, it's some unit of measurement, on this worksheet, because it doesn't depend on how I'm zoomed in. It's always going to be constant on the sheet. So if I run that, oh, what's the problem? Oh, I'm in trouble. Boy, am I glad I put do events in this loop. What's it doing? It's moving shape 1 over. Like I never told it to do that. Oh no, I think it stopped because it did get out because X went up and that's what it looked at. So let's move that back. I moved that one over 9 times. I just need to change this to X so that as X goes up, better start X at 1. X will start at 1, do until X is greater than the number of shapes. Yeah, that should just shift them all over. Oh, right here. Oh, that was a problem. You couldn't have said that before I ran it. That's good. Right. So that just put them all to where the left shape was. Maybe a little bit ugly, but eventually we'll see them all move. These poor charts are getting uglier by the moment. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of this stop and run it. We're moving on. Okay. So the point is that collections, like understanding collections is nice because they're the same. They all have a count. You can iterate across them. You can treat all the elements in the set universally, uniformly. Okay, any other questions? Let's call that good for today. I will see you on Wednesday. Class dismissed. Thank you. Thank you. You're too kind.